Dr. Wu is Executive Director of Californians for Equal Rights on No Proposition 16, the principal ballot measure committee. In opposition to Proposition 16 previously, was the Director of Administration at Asian American Coalition for Education, AACE. She holds a Ph.D. in International Studies from the University of Miami and has authorized a book, Chinese Oil Enterprises in Latin America, Corporate Social Responsibility. If you like the book, please go ahead and buy the book to read, as well as many chapters in other books. In her official capacity, Dr. Wu has been interviewed by NBC News, NPR Boston, Boston Globe, Quartz, China Daily, College Fix, and other prominent news sources. As a writer, she has been published on the South China Morning Post, China Dialogue, and Oil Price, among other outlets. She will introduce the influence of Proposition 16 to college admission and public employment. Let's welcome Dr. Wu.
Thank you, Melissa, for the introduction. I have prepared a short speech, which will be followed by my PowerPoint presentation, if that's okay with the organizers. So my name is Wenyuan Wu. I am, as Melissa identified, the Executive Director at Californians for Equal Rights No on 16, the principal ballot measure committee in opposition to Prop 16. Thank you for inviting me to this very energetic forum tonight. I appreciate this opportunity to speak to our audience on such a paramount issue to California and our AAPI community. My organization, Californians for Equal Rights, is led by former UC Regent, Mr. Ward Connolly, who also chaired the California Civil Rights Initiative, which facilitated the passage of Prop 209 that Prop 16 seeks to repeal. Prop 16 in general is unjust, unnecessary, and plainly wrong. It's a simple repeal. It seeks to overturn Prop 209, which was passed by popular vote in 1996. Prop 209 has set a progressive precedent for anti-discrimination laws in 8 other US states and California that mirror the true spirit of the landmark Civil Rights Act of 1964. It stops racism, makes it so that the government picks the most qualified contractors, students, and employees based on merit, not race, sex, ethnicity, or national origin. In reality, since 1996, California has made strides in diversity and inclusion in public education and employment, as well as contracting. Underrepresented minorities have experienced significant gains in enrollment and graduation at both UC and CSU. Minority admissions at UC exceeded those of 1996, both in absolute numbers and as a percentage of all admits. The UC system in 2020 announced a historic first for admitting Latino students as the largest freshman group. In this July, 4-year graduation rates of underrepresented racial minorities also rose from 31% following shortly before Prop 209 to 55% in 2014. The California State University system has a student body that is 40% Hispanic and 70% racial minorities. Both women and men of color saw largest gains in employment rates proportional to their working age population growth. Minority civil servants increased from 38% in 1990 to almost 58% today. Women in California today make up the majority of the law profession and the majority of college degree earners, while our state embraces the nation's strongest equal pay law. In essence, we are already there. California is already there. Let's celebrate our truly diverse and dynamic California and recognize extra government measures on race and sex preferences are unnecessary and will incur great harms on California's tax base, economy, productivity, fairness, and competitiveness. With that being said, I'm going to share my more technical slides on the impact, the particular impacts of this very toxic ballot measure on public employment and public education. Bear with me. So let me emphasize what Prop 16 really is in its essence. As Senator Chan just noted, Prop 16 removes 37 words from our state constitution. The state shall not discriminate against or grant preferential treatment to any individual or group on the basis of race, sex, color, ethnicity, or national origin in the operation of public employment, public education, or public contracting. Its overarching goal is to bring back government preferences based on race and sex. Let's acknowledge, one, Prop 16 is not affirmative action. Socioeconomic based affirmative action measures have never been banned by Prop 209. Two, Prop 16 is backed by billionaires, special interest groups, and woke elites who want to impose racial preferences on ordinary Californians. Three, Prop 16 is an epitome of racism and illiberal attacks on our democratic principles of equality and liberty. Four, the bill is not about diversity because diversity has never been absent in California. And lastly, Prop 16 will hurt its intended beneficiaries. It will drag everyone down by lowering the standards and perpetuating academic mismatch. And I do want to zero in on the impacts of this bill in terms of eroding equal education rights of Asian Americans. So when we look at the current racial makeup of the UC system, we'll see that Asian Americans by and large make up the biggest student group at all UC campuses. In 2020, that translates into 35% of the freshman class. And Asian American students also enjoy the highest graduation rate compared with any other racial group, 68% in 2019. There are, and the high performance and the high admission squarely reflect the number of applicants. We also have the highest applicants at the UC system, over 48,000 this year, which make up about 27% of the applicant pool. As a result of these metrics, we are often, our students are often wrongly labeled as the so-called overrepresented. And the problem, according to Prop 16's proponents, is racism, is an unequal playing field. Is that really the case? So I invite you to dig deeper on why Asians are so-called overrepresented at UC and other selective colleges across the states and the state and the country. So in general, we have Asian American students have excellent educational performances as a group. Highest high school graduation rate, almost 94%. Highest college preparedness, 94% as well. Best math proficiency on the K-12 level, 74% compared with 54% for Caucasian students, 28% for Latino students, and 20% for Black students. Best reading proficiency in K-12, almost 77%, and best academic metrics among the disadvantaged. So among all this socioeconomically disadvantaged 8th graders, Asian American students 57% of Asian American students achieve math proficiency as compared with 31% for Latino students, 21% for Native Americans, and 12% for African American students. So what does that mean? That means Prop 16 is a cover, is a bandage over systematic problems in our K-12 education. In 2019, according to the California Department of Education, math proficiency levels of Black, Latino, American Indian, White, and Asian students stand at 20.55%, 28.05%, 26.58%, 54.23%, and 74.37% respectively. Reading proficiency levels for these groups are at 33%, 41%, 28%, 65%, 77%. So this is what we usually call the racial achievement gap. Without addressing root problems like in our communities, in K-12, in access, Prop 16 can only achieve its goal, its purported goal of increasing representation and leveling the playing field through racial balancing, which is illegal and unconstitutional. And that in reality will translate into victimizing Asian American students, stigmatizing the underrepresented student groups, and stoking divisive racial tensions among Californians of different colors, of different races and or ethnicities. And Prop 16, even though it's a California ballot initiative, it will perpetuate a systematic problem in college admissions, which is anti-Asian discrimination, as indicated by the Harvard case, the Yale case, and many other cases against many other civil rights complaints, and also litigations against selective colleges and even selective high schools or school districts across the country, many of which were led by my home group, the Asian American Coalition for Education. Since the 1990s, Asian students have experienced systematic discrimination in college admissions in the forms of de facto, which was ruled as unconstitutional by the 1978 Bakke decision, in the form of higher standards. So on average, and this is not from journalistic reporting, this is from an academic consensus by a group of economists and social scientists. On average, an Asian American student must score 140, 270, and 450 points higher in SAT than a white, Hispanic, and Black students, everything else being equal. And there is also the illegal application of negative racial stereotypes, like in the Harvard case, the admissions office uses a system called personal score to consistently rate Asian American applicants lower than any other racial groups across all academic deciles, and they are called lacking in leadership, nerdy, not personable. So all these kind of negative stereotypes, which are also unconstitutional by the 2003 Supreme Court ruling on Grutter versus Bollinger. And currently, when we look at the national landscape of race-based affirmative action following California and Prop 209 in 1996, 8 other US states have joined California to embrace the true spirit of equal protection for all explicit in our 1964 Civil Rights Act, as well as the 14th Amendment to the US Constitution. Texas, Washington, Florida, Michigan, Nebraska, Arizona, New Hampshire, Oklahoma, and the latest Idaho all have joined California to ban race-based affirmative action. And most of these initiatives were chaired by our president, Mr. Ward Connolly. And there is also overwhelming qualitative evidence from personal accounts to corroborate the statistical evidence that there is a systematic problem of anti-Asian discrimination in college admissions. On June 9th, 2015, for example, Sarah Halverson, who is a former associate dean of admissions at the University of Pennsylvania, wrote in her LA Times opinion piece, and I quote, "For example, there is an expectation that Asian Americans will be the highest test scorers, and at the top of their class, anything less can become an easy reason for denial. And yet, even when Asian American students meet this high threshold, they may be destined for the waitlist or outright denial because they don't stand out among the other high achieving students in their cohort. The most exceptional academic applicants may be seen as the least unique, and so admission officers are really moved to fight for them." This is what I talked about as negative stereotypes. On May 25th, 2016, Dr. Michelle Hernandez, former Dartmouth admission officer, revealed in another op-ed that Ivy admission officers often use racial stereotypes to discriminate against Asian American students. In another report by the Inside Higher Education in 2016, we found out that 42% of admission officers from private colleges and 39% of those from public colleges acknowledged that they hold Asian American applicants at a higher standard, which is also unconstitutional. So let's go to the area of public employment. My biggest issue, and I would also say that my campaign's biggest issue with Prop 16's claims on public employment, or more specifically, women and minorities' access to public employment since 2009, is that these are lies. They're dismissing the existing gains in diversity and representation achieved in California's public employment sector since the early 1990s. So let's look at the numbers. According to a 2007 UC Berkeley peer-reviewed paper, workforce diversity for people of color in public employment has increased significantly and reflected changes in the working age population. In 2007 was the first year when people of color became the majority of California civil service employees, and this trend has continued and deepened since then. And there are important within group divergences for civil servants' representation relative to their working age population by race. For example, Black civil rights workers are overrepresented. Asian and Native American public workers are sufficiently represented. Latino civil workers have seen declines in representation. So I point this out not to stoke tensions or not to say, hey, we shouldn't fight for it because we are already sufficiently represented, or African Americans should not fight for it, for Prop 16, should not support Prop 16 because they are overrepresented. My point is to peg representation and percentages of different racial groups in employment and education to the general demographics is a false notion. It's a very inflammatory notion that ignores the root causes of our discrepancies in economic access, in educational achievement, etc. So we should not think in terms of that. That will backfire. That kind of thinking, that kind of narrative will always backfire. So wider socioeconomic and cultural reasons are at play to explain persistent gaps or discrepancies on a race basis, on the basis of race or ethnicity. Well, we can look at inefficient spending on equal access in education, in career training, community segregation, breakdown of the family unit, high crime rate in certain underserved communities. The key is K-12. The key is not Prop 16. Prop 16 is not going to solve any of these issues. educational deficiencies will translate into stagnant wages for low-skilled workers who are most vulnerable to automation, while 1/3 of working Californians make less than $15 an hour. These jobs are disproportionately held by Blacks and Latinos. The problem here is not blatant racism, but interlocking factors of low educational attainment, a changing economic structure, and the state universities lags in improving STEM training. Moreover, Prop 16 will open the floodgate of racial spoils, of racial preferences. It will be part of a very toxic and backward diversity pipeline that will become a bamboo ceiling for Asian Americans, bamboo ceiling in corporate America, which is well documented, toxic stereotypes that bleed from education, from college admissions will be perpetuated in employment, and illegal racial balancing in employment, especially in high-tech and educational sectors, would surely follow the passage of this proposition. In general, I'm against Prop 16 on principle because this bill fundamentally rejects the equality principle. It undermines the merit-based principle, which is supported by the majority of Americans, 74% across all racial groups. This bill, this ballot measure deepens racial divisions and conflicts. It would legalize racial discrimination at every level of government agencies and schools in California, and it will increase the California government's huge deficit exponentially. Again, Proposition 16 is unjust, unnecessary, and plainly wrong. And I will invite our audience here and our friends here to follow our campaign. Our campaign, Californians for Equal Rights No on 16, is registered in California with a mission to defend Prop 209 and the principle of equal rights as enshrined in the California Constitution. This year, we are leading a campaign to reject Proposition 16, previously known as Assembly Constitutional Amendment Number 5, which intends to repeal Prop 209 and bring back government preferences on the basis of race and gender in education, employment, and contracting. Our official website is noprop16.info, and you can make your generous contributions at the link below our official website. And I'm confident that my colleague Damien here will explain more about our campaign and what we'll do going forward. We have 24 days left until the election day. So thank you very much for this time for me to talk about this very important topic.